The sandwich cost her everything, but it gave him a future worth 47 million. Victoria, 9 years old and black, saw the starving white boy through the fence. Her family had nothing, but she gave him her lunch anyway, every day for 6 months. No one asked her to, no one thanked her. She just did it. When he left, Isaiah made a wild promise. "I'll marry you when I'm rich." She laughed, then tied half her ribbon around his wrist. 22 years vanished. Isaiah became a CEO, spent 5 years searching for her, bought buildings, hired investigators, found nothing. Tonight, he'd walk into a community meeting in Chicago. Victoria would be there, still wearing her half of the ribbon. Neither knew they were seconds away from reunion. Isaiah Mitchell woke at 6 a.m. in a penthouse that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Lake Michigan stretched out below. Sunrise painted the water gold. He didn't notice. He never did. The espresso machine hummed Italian. 7,000? He pressed a button and walked away before the cup filled. His closet held 40 suits, all tailored, all perfect. He grabbed one without looking. The apartment was silent, always silent. No photos on the walls, no personal touches, nothing that said someone actually lived here. It looked like a hotel, felt like a tomb. His phone buzzed. His assistant. "Board meeting at 9. The Thompson deal closed." 12 million. Isaiah texted back. Good. 12 million. He felt nothing. He walked to his home office, unlocked a drawer. Inside, a small glass frame containing a faded red ribbon. This was the only thing that mattered. He touched the glass gently. 22 years old. The fabric was deteriorating despite preservation. Every morning he looked at it. Every morning the same thought. Where is she? The board meeting was predictable. Congratulations. Handshakes, applause for another successful quarter. Isaiah smiled, said the right things, played the part. Inside, nothing. His business partner, Richard, pulled him aside after. "You okay, man? You seem distant." "I'm fine. You've been saying that for 5 years. Ever since you started buying up South Chicago." Isaiah said nothing. "Why specifically?" "There's no profit for years. I have my reasons." Richard studied him. "This is about that girl, isn't it? The one you're looking for." Child's dream. Isaiah looked at the ribbon, his face, usually an impassive mask of control, softening for a fleeting second. "It's about a promise," he said, his voice low. "A debt." Richard sighed, knowing the conversation was over. He clapped Isaiah on the shoulder. "Just don't let the past cost you the present, man." Isaiah gave a curt nod, already retreating back into himself. The present was the waiting room for the past. It had no value of its own. The rest of his day was a blur of efficient, empty motion. A lunch with investors where the food was tasteless. An afternoon, reviewing architectural plans for a new mixed-use development in the very neighborhood that haunted him. He had bought blocks of South Chicago, not for gentrification's profit, but as a desperate, sprawling trap. He owned the buildings, the vacant lots, the struggling community centers. He had put his money into the soil of her last known location, hoping the roots of his capital would somehow shake loose a single name, Victoria. His investigators had hit wall after wall, a common name, a neighborhood with a transient population, a childhood story with no last names, no concrete addresses, just the indelible memory of a chain-link fence and a ribbon. At 6 p.m., his driver, Marcus, pulled the black sedan to the curb outside a nondescript community hall in South Chicago. The building was a squat brick structure that had seen better decades. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Save Our Park, Community Meeting. All welcome." This was a different world from his penthouse. The air here was thick with the scent of fried food from a nearby takeout, car exhaust, and the damp chill of the lake wind cutting through the streets. Isaiah, in his $7,000 suit, felt like an astronaut who had landed on the wrong planet. He dismissed Marcus. "I'll find my own way back." "Sir, this area—" Marcus began, concern etched on his face. "It's fine, Marcus," Isaiah said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He had to do this alone. He pushed open the door to the hall. The room was a kaleidoscope of noise and life. Folding chairs scraped against scuffed linoleum. Children weaved between adult legs. The air was warm, smelling of old coffee, wet wool, and earnest conversation. A man at a podium was speaking passionately about city budget cuts to green spaces. Isaiah stood at the back, a statue of imported wool and quiet intensity, scanning the crowd. His eyes moved over faces, elderly women with kind eyes, tired-looking young parents, a group of teenagers joking in a corner. He didn't know what he expected to see. A ghost, a miracle. And then he saw it. Not her face, not yet, but a flash of color against a dark sweater, tied in a simple bow around a woman's wrist as she raised her hand to make a point at the front of the room. A faded red satin ribbon, the exact shade of memory, the exact twin of the fragment locked in glass in his drawer, 4,000 feet above. Time did not slow down. It shattered. The noise of the hall faded into a dull, roaring silence. His heart, a dormant organ he had long considered purely functional, hammered against his ribs with a violent, painful urgency. He couldn't see her face properly. She was turned slightly, speaking to an older woman beside her. He saw her profile, the curve of a cheek, the set of her shoulders under a practical, worn jacket. He saw the easy, confident way she gestured as she spoke. A leader in this small room. He began to move, a man swimming against a current of bodies, his gaze locked on that ribbon. He was unaware of the glances his presence drew, of the stark contrast he posed to the room. He was a missile and the ribbon was his target. She finished her point and turned to listen to the next speaker, her face coming into full view. 22 years fell away. The 9-year-old girl's features were refined, matured by life and strength, but they were hers. The same wide, earnest eyes, though now they held the weight of wisdom and resilience. The same full mouth, currently set in a line of thoughtful concentration. She was beautiful, not in the polished, airbrushed way of the women in his social orbit, but with a profound, grounded realness that stole the air from his lungs. Victoria. He was 10 feet away, then 5. He stopped mere steps from her, suddenly paralyzed. The wild promise of a desperate, hungry boy echoed in his head. "I'll marry you when I'm rich." What was he doing? What could he possibly say? The CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed 8-figure deals without breaking a sweat, was utterly, completely undone. She must have felt the intensity of his stare. She turned her head, and her brown eyes met his. There was no recognition, only a mild, polite curiosity at the strangely out-of-place man staring at her. Then her gaze dropped, instinctively to his hands, which were clenched at his sides, to his left wrist where, under the crisp white cuff of his shirt and the platinum watch, a thin, faded strip of red satin was just visible, tied in a permanent, fragile knot. Her eyes flew back to his face, widening. Her breath hitched, a small, audible gasp lost in the room's murmur. Her hand rose unconsciously to the ribbon on her own wrist. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The world for both of them narrowed to a point, to two halves of a whole, separated by time and fortune now 3 feet apart. Victoria? The name left his lips not as the powerful baritone of Isaiah Mitchell, CEO, but as the raw, cracked whisper of Isaiah, the starving boy at the fence. The color drained from her face, then flooded back. A lifetime of questions, of a memory cherished but assumed to be lost forever, flickered in her eyes. Isaiah? It was a breath, a disbelieving prayer. The man at the podium continued speaking about playground equipment, utterly unaware that a universe had just collapsed and rebuilt itself in the middle of his meeting. For a long moment they simply stared. The clamor of the community meeting seemed to warp and bend around them, becoming a distant, irrelevant soundtrack. Isaiah saw the journey in her eyes, the shock, the dawning comprehension, the flood of a shared history rushing in to fill the 22-year void. He also saw caution, a wariness built from a life of hardship he could only imagine. "You," she began, her voice stronger now, laced with incredulity. "You're really—" "It's me," he said, the words feeling inadequate, childish. He took a half-step closer, his own hand moving to his wrist, his fingers brushing the ribbon beneath his cuff. "I kept it. I kept my promise." Victoria's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. a gesture that spoke of a woman who had little time for sentimentality. Her gaze swept over him, taking in the impeccable suit, the watch, the sheer aura of wealth that clung to him like a scent. The boy she had fed through a fence was gone, replaced by this prince, a flicker of something. Hard passed through her expression. Not envy, something closer to grief. "You look," she searched for the word, "different." "So do you," he said, and he meant it as the highest compliment. She was more than the memory. She was substance, strength, reality. An elderly woman next to Victoria, who had been watching the exchange with sharp interest, nudged her. "Vicky, honey, you know this gentleman? He's blocking the aisle." The spell was momentarily broken. Victoria flushed, a beautiful warm hue spreading across her cheeks. "And yes, Mrs. Green, this is an old friend, Isaiah." The name felt strange and familiar on her tongue. "Isaiah, this is my neighbor, Mrs. Green." Isaiah managed a stiff nod. "Ma'am, well, you two catch up outside," Mrs. Green said, her eyes twinkling with unsuppressed curiosity. "We can handle the park talk. You look like you've got some talking of your own to do." Victoria hesitated, looking back at the podium where the meeting was grinding on. This was her world, her fight. Letting this ghost from the past pull her away felt like a betrayal of it. But the ghost was real, and he was here, and the ribbon on his wrist was proof. She gave a tight, decisive nod. Okay, just outside." She led the way, weaving through the chairs with a familiar ease Isaiah lacked. He followed, feeling colossal and clumsy. The cold night air hit them as they stepped out onto the empty sidewalk. The buzz of the hall replaced by the distant wail of a siren and the rustle of wind in bare trees. A street lamp cast a pool of jaundiced light around them. She turned to face him, crossing her arms over her chest, not against the cold, but as a barrier. "How?" The single word held a universe of questions. "How did you find me? How did you become this? How is this real?" "I've been looking for you for 5 years," he said, the confession tumbling out. "I hired people. I bought property here. I thought if I owned enough of the neighborhood, I don't know, I'd find a trace." Victoria's eyebrows shot up. "You're the Mitchell in Mitchell Holdings? The one buying up half of South Side?" There was no warmth in the question, only a dawning, uncomfortable understanding. "Yes." "Why?" The question was a blade. "To find you." She shook her head, a short, disbelieving motion. "You bought buildings to find one person? Do you have any idea what that does? The rent hikes, the speculation, the fear that comes with that?" Her anger was like a physical blow. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Gratitude, joy, tears. Not this, not accusation. "I didn't do it to hurt anyone. I did it to find you. It was the only way I could think of. I had nothing else. No last name. Just Victoria. Just the memory of this." He held up his wrist. The sight of the ribbon deflated her anger slightly, but the tension remained. "You found me," she said flatly. "Now what, Isaiah? You're a rich man." "Promise kept. What do you want?" He was floundering. The script he hadn't even realized he'd written was in ashes. "And I want to thank you, to repay you. You saved my life, Victoria. That sandwich, you went hungry for me. For 6 months." A sad, soft smile touched her lips. "I remember. You were so skinny. Your eyes were so big." The memory connected them again, thinning the ice. "But you don't owe me anything, Isaiah. I was a kid. You were a kid. I did what anyone should do." "No," he said vehemently. "You did what no one else did. You were the only good thing in a year of hell. You gave me hope. That promise? It was all I had to hold on to. It's what kept me going. It's why I'm standing here." He took a deep breath, the corporate veneer fully gone, leaving only the raw, desperate man beneath. "Please, let me buy you a coffee. Let me explain. Let me just talk to you." Victoria studied his face, looking for the boy in the man. She saw him then, in the intensity of his eyes, in the earnest, almost painful hope there. She sighed, the fight leaving her shoulders. "There's a diner 2 blocks over. It's not a penthouse, but the coffee's hot." It sounds perfect. The diner was a relic. Vinyl booths patched with tape, a checkerboard floor, the smell of grease and bacon permeating the air. They sat across from each other in a corner booth. Isaiah looked profoundly out of place. Victoria looked like she belonged. Over mugs of bitter coffee, the story spilled out. He told her about being taken in by a distant, austere aunt after that summer, about the relentless drive that consumed him, a drive fueled by a childish vow. He told her about building the company, about the hollow success, about the ribbon in its glass case, the true measure of his worth. He spoke of the 5-year search, the dead ends, the despair. She listened, stirring sugar into her coffee. Then she told her story. It was not a fairy tale. Her family had struggled always. She'd worked 2 jobs through community college. She was now a social worker for the very neighborhood they sat in, fighting the very forces of displacement his money had, however unintentionally amplified. She was unmarried, dedicated to her community, to her aging mother. Her life was built on grit and giving, not acquisition. The other half of the ribbon was not in a glass case. It was on her wrist, a daily touchstone, a private reminder of a single, pure act of kindness from her childhood. "I never forgot you either," she said softly. "I wondered if you were okay. I hoped you were, but I never imagined this." She gestured vaguely at him at the symbol of his this. "The promise," he said, his voice thick. "I meant it, Victoria." She looked at him then, with a deep, heartbreaking maturity. "Isaiah, you were a scared, hungry 9-year-old boy. I was a little girl who shared her lunch. That promise was beautiful, but it was a child's promise. We're not children anymore." "What does that mean?" he asked, a cold fear gripping him. "It means you don't have to marry me," she said, a gentle humor in her tone. But her eyes were serious. "Repayment isn't what I need. That sandwich wasn't a loan. It was a gift." She reached across the table, and for the first time, her fingers touched his hand. The contact was electric. "Seeing you whole, successful, alive, that's the thank you. That's more than enough." He turned his hand over, grasping hers. Her hand was strong, slightly rough, real. "It's not enough for me," he confessed, the truth of it crashing over him. "I have everything, Victoria, and I have nothing. You showed me what it meant to be human when I was 9. I've been trying to get back to that feeling ever since." Tears finally spilled over onto her cheeks. "Oh, Isaiah." "I'm not asking for anything," he rushed to say, though it was a lie. He was asking for everything. "Just let me be in your life. Let me know you. Let me help. Not with money, not like that. But let me put this fortune to use. For your fights. For this park. For whatever you need." She was silent for a long time, looking at their joined hands, at the 2 faded ribbons, inches apart on the scratched table. The boy from the past and the woman of the present were finally in the same room. The future was a blank page. "The park meeting," she said finally, a new light in her eyes. "The city wants to sell the land to a developer to build condos. We're trying to stop it. It's the last green space for kids for blocks." Isaiah didn't even blink. "What's the developer's name?" She told him. It was a rival firm. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face for the first time in 22 years. It transformed him, erasing the cold CEO, bringing the hopeful boy to the surface. "Consider it handled. The park stays. We'll fund its renovation. A proper playground. A community garden." "We?" she asked, a tentative smile touching her lips. "If you'll let me," he said. "Not as repayment. As a first step." Victoria looked at him, at the earnest man who had crossed a universe of privilege and poverty to find her, guided only by a thread of red satin. She saw not just the billionaire, but the lonely boy she had chosen to feed. She saw a future not of being saved, but of building something together, something real. She squeezed his hand. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Isaiah. Let's start with the park." Outside the diner window, Chicago moved on, cold and uncaring. But in the warm, greasy light of the booth, 2 halves of a ribbon, and 2 halves of a life began the slow, careful work of weaving themselves back into a whole, and so a simple act of kindness, a sandwich passed through a fence, echoed across 22 years, proving that the smallest gifts can grow into stories that change lives. If this story of Victoria and Isaiah touched your heart, you can be a part of our mission to share more light. Do this right now. Like this video if you believe in the power of kindness. subscribe to Kindness True Stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our weekly true stories of hope, compassion, and humanity. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that good still exists in the world. Your support helps us find and tell more stories that matter. Stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.